When a modern commercial airliner takes off, its safety depends on a delicate balance of physics and software. But in the case of the 737 MAX, that balance was compromised long before the first passenger ever boarded. For decades, Boeing was synonymous with engineering perfection. "If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going," was a genuine industry mantra. Over time, however, the executives in the boardroom began focusing less on aerospace innovation and more on maximizing shareholder returns. The cost of that shift became devastatingly clear. Across 2 flights, Lion Air 610 and Ethiopian Airlines 302, 346 passengers and crew members died. Both crashes involved brand-new Boeing 737 MAX aircraft falling out of the sky. Investigations eventually traced these tragedies back to a specific intersection of financial targets and engineering compromises. The record shows a series of calculated decisions that prioritized a stock's performance over the fundamental requirements of flight safety. To understand how this happened, we have to rewind to December 2010. Airbus, Boeing's primary European rival, announced the A320neo family. It promised significantly greater fuel efficiency, creating an immediate, massive cost-saving incentive for airlines. Boeing's dominance in the single-aisle market was suddenly at serious risk. Boeing faced a critical choice. They could spend roughly a decade and $10 billion designing a brand-new, highly efficient airplane from scratch, or they could find a much cheaper, faster shortcut to keep their customers from jumping to Airbus. They chose the shortcut. To bypass the massive costs of development, Boeing decided to slap new, fuel-efficient engines onto their existing 737 airframe, a basic design that dates back to 1967. They called this retrofitted jet the 737 MAX. This diagram of the 737 profile illustrates the physical problem they created. The new engines were much larger than the old ones. To make them fit under the low-riding 737 wings, Boeing had to mount them further forward and higher up. In flight, this new placement generated an unnatural aerodynamic force that pushed the plane's nose upwards. This engine placement transformed a stable, proven airframe into one that required a software workaround to stay level. It was the result of matching a competitor's fuel efficiency without redesigning the jet from the ground up to accommodate the larger hardware. To fix the plane's physical tendency to pitch up, Boeing's engineers wrote a piece of code. They called it the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. Its sole job was to automatically apply a high-rate trim command to force the stabilizer down whenever the plane's nose angled too high. But the way MCAS was built contained a massive vulnerability. As we see in this schematic, the system relied entirely on data from a single angle of attack, or AOA sensor. This sensor measures the angle of the plane's nose relative to the oncoming wind. There was no backup sensor feeding into the master computer. If that single piece of exterior hardware malfunctioned and sent a false reading, the MCAS software would engage anyway. It would repeatedly force the airplane into a steep dive, actively fighting the flight crew's physical attempts to pull the nose back up. Boeing knew that requiring pilots to train on a new system in physical simulators would cost airlines millions, destroying the MAX's main selling point. So they intentionally kept MCAS out of the flight manuals. Pilots had no idea the software even existed. To keep the plane's sticker price attractive and development costs low, the company completely bypassed a vital layer of human oversight. They placed ultimate control in a single sensor and a hidden line of code. In the cockpit, this design choice created pure chaos. Pilots found themselves physically wrestling with their own control columns, frantically pulling back while an invisible, undocumented system aggressively pushed the aircraft toward the ground. This exact scenario played out twice. On October 29, 2018, it brought down Lion Air Flight 610. Barely 5 months later, an identical MCAS misfire doomed Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. Prior to takeoff, neither aircraft had reported any known technical troubles. After a normal departure, a single sensor failed, and the flight crews were suddenly ambushed by their own airplane. The crews were left fighting an automated system that functioned exactly as Boeing designed it, responding to data the pilots couldn't see and countering actions the manufacturer never warned them they'd need to take. Following the groundings, investigators began digging through the company's internal communications to answer a crucial question. What exactly did the executives and engineers know before those planes ever left the tarmac? The paper trail was damning. In internal emails from December 2015, a Boeing engineer explicitly raised the exact issue that would later cause the crashes, asking, "Are we vulnerable to single AOA sensor failures with the MCAS implementation?" A few months later, in 2016, test pilots observed MCAS aggressively countering their attempts to trim the plane, causing dangerous oscillation. The issue was formally flagged in Boeing's squawk process, yet management ignored the warnings to keep the aggressive production schedule on track. They were able to get away with this because of a weakened regulatory environment. By leveraging an underfunded Federal Aviation Administration, Boeing was effectively allowed to self-certify the safety of the 737 MAX. The agency designed to protect the flying public from dangerous aircraft had handed its oversight authority directly to the corporation it was supposed to be policing. The Department of Justice eventually stepped in, charging Boeing with a criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States. To avoid a trial, the company entered a deferred prosecution agreement, paying $2.5 billion in penalties and victim compensation. This chart visualizes the true scale of that penalty. While $2.5 billion sounds massive, it's a tiny sliver compared to Boeing's cash flow during the same era. Between 2013 and 2018, while the MAX was being developed, Boeing spent a staggering $41.5 billion strictly on stock buybacks to enrich investors. Throughout all of this, not a single executive served prison time. Dennis Muilenburg, the CEO who oversaw the MAX crisis, was fired but walked away with over $100 million in compensation. The Boeing 737 MAX crashes leave us with a heavy reality. When a corporation is allowed to let its stock price dictate its engineering decisions, the true cost of doing business is ultimately paid in human lives.